Hi everyone, I'm the Rum.
And I'm the Wine.
We're an expat couple living here in Dublin, Ireland for 4 years now. Yeah, we make videos about what it's like to move to Ireland, what it's like living in Ireland, and general thoughts and process to help you adapt and, be good little expats. So if any of that sounds interesting, please do subscribe and check out our playlist with the tons of other videos we've made with content about Ireland. So today's video, once again, blah blah blah, raging pandemic, we all know, wish it was over. But one of the things that we were thinking about is that when this entire thing started, people wonder, would the pandemic cause rents to drop in Dublin? Yeah, today's video, we're going to talk all about it from that expression. I think you already know what the answer is. So every quarter, or every month now, or bi-monthly, I'm not quite sure, this website, daft.ie, which you would have mentioned as a place to go look for properties and rental units, etc. in Ireland. Check this past video. Yeah, that site brings out a report about the sales and the rentals in Dublin over that time period. So we've been following this as help of our decision of where to live in Ireland.
So when we first moved to Dublin, we knew it was expensive, but to be honest, we kind of underestimated it because we lived in London before and we were like, we know what expensive rent is. We've paid it in London, we've seen it, we've looked at the housing ads in London and ran away screaming. So we thought we were prepared because, there was this thing with the Great Recession where all the housing prices dropped and it was in the news. And they've been creeping back up, or more like, what is a fast movement upwards?
Galloping
back up ever since then. So when we moved to Dublin first in 2016, the average rent in Dublin was €1,600, which is a lot already. But it's been still climbing ever since then by a lot. So in 2019...
Yeah, in 2019, at the start, it was about 2,060 euros. Yeah, as it stands in July 2020, it's 2030. No, not the year. 2,030 euros.
A whole decrease of €30.
Yeah, you could get an entire meal with that. Of course, for people saving and, want a little bit of rent. 30 quid is 30 quid, but most of us were hoping for more than the hundreds, because that would have been quite nice.
So initially when the lockdown happened and when people realized tourists wouldn't be coming into the country, and if you haven't watched our other videos, like one of the big issues that a lot of activists in the housing space in Dublin argue for is that it should be much harder to rent out places as Airbnbs, because there's a lot of flats that could be used for people to live in rather than just for Airbnbs, and that are empty a lot of the time. So a lot of people in the beginning were optimistic because it's like no tourists equals Airbnbs becoming flats, right? That should mean more housing for everyone, cheaper rents. Didn't quite work out that way.
So what happened? Yeah, so back in April, numbers did drop for rent, but by the time July came around, they started going up again. Our uneducated guess is thinking that probably we had the tech workers who didn't suffer really job losses like people in other industries, and that kept the demand actually going.
Like, people have still messaged us on our Facebook and Instagram every now and then. We get questions from people who are moving to Ireland, and that really hasn't stopped since the pandemic. There was maybe in the initial lockdown, there was a slowdown of people being maybe unsure about moving, but from what we can see in our very limited amount of data and a limited amount of opinion, people are just still moving all the same to Dublin regardless of the pandemic.
Yeah, so the demand never really seemed to have died down. It's still increasing as soon as the lockdown period's finished. It was almost like back to normal. Yeah, it kind of seems like there wasn't really any incentive for landlords to drop prices. What we did have was a rent freeze during that time. So luckily rents were frozen, you couldn't get kicked out. But after that, there wasn't any decrease in prices. Yeah. Everything just stood, steady.
So for example, with our flats, because we moved in April, so in April we were actually due for a rent increase, but because of the rent freeze we were lucky and we did save like 120 something euro over the months where the rent freeze was still active, but after that the rent decreased as it normally would have anyway. So even though it temporarily saved us money, in the long run it didn't change anything to that price of the flat on the market, and I imagine it's the same for a lot of other flats.
Yeah, because we were watching what was happening in places like New York, where the rental prices were plummeting, you know. You've watched some stuff where people actually moved their flat to a nice, better flat for around the same price. Yeah, we're kind of hoping something like that could happen, maybe something cool, but nah, never did.
So not to be the stereotypical Dubliners who only ever talk about Dublin and act like Dublin is all of Ireland, of course the report also mentions numbers for the rest of Ireland. So we usually don't talk about it and throw it in the same pot, because Dublin kind of, I think, also a bit skews the numbers on a national level, because it's just so extreme here. Because on the national level, the average rent is €1,412, which is still a huge amount, but it is probably a bit affected by Dublin prices just being so expensive. But at the same time, it doesn't mean other places are cheaper, unfortunately. I wish it was, but like the average rent in places like Kilkenny and Limerick, even for Cork, although I thought for Cork it would be higher, is about 1k average rent per month, which is quite a lot considering those are significantly smaller cities with probably, in our limited experience, I imagine not as many very high paying salaries as you have in Dublin, where you have a lot of multinational companies. So out there, I imagine for some of those like smaller cities with still very high rents is maybe even harder for people there, because the rent makes up a much bigger proportion of their salary than for some of the tech workers in Dublin, not Ireland.
Yeah, they're in Dublin, but in Ireland. Yeah, so the crazy thing is that if you're a tech worker, then you're working remotely, and you probably, you know, go live in another county, but still getting Dublin, you know, pay. That could be a good thing for you. We've actually heard of about a couple of people doing that from friends of friends, pretty much. And yeah, and one of the other things is that a lot of people, when they first come to Dublin, they do flat share. So, I mean, even if you're flat sharing with somebody and probably in another county, you're probably getting some sort of relief if you're moving from Dublin somewhere else. But the thing is that you have to work remotely, and not everything allows you that luxury, blessing, curse. Yeah, that
Let us know in the comments what it is for you.
Of course, jumping back to Dublin, a few places have the highest rents. They're the usual offenders, you know. They're the even numbers, you know. Dublin, in South Dublin City, you know, Dublin 2, Dublin 4, Dublin 6, Dublin 8. Yeah, all places that we watch we currently live in. So, yeah, that makes sense. But some of the more cheaper places, that would be in, you know, more some of the northern counties. So we're talking about, let me check my notes here, like Rush, Swords, Kerry, you know, and
Scaries. Not Kerry.
yes, sorry, I still have the vacation on my mind.
It's okay. We all still wish we were in Kerry, somewhere in a national park, just walking in the forest.
Yeah, so, you know, other areas such as Dublin 14, 11, 17, yeah, those seem to have some of the cheaper prices that you can get. So, you know, if it's in your budget, etc., go to those places. You know, we kind of have a guess that we're going to see that shift pretty much as remote working continues.
We've heard from a lot of people that they're considering moving to different parts of town, because we moved very centrally because of the office, and public transport isn't that great in Dublin. Like, you need to plan in a lot of extra time because rush hour is just crazy, or you might not get on a bus, or the Lewis is just so full it's almost impossible to get on. So we moved very centrally so we could walk to work and save money and especially time on transport. But now it's useless, because I don't know if you've been keeping up with the restrictions we have in Ireland, but even if we wanted to, we wouldn't be allowed in the office since March. Because if you're able to do your job from home, which with working for internet companies we are, like, there's no purpose for us to go to the office, and we're actually legally not allowed to, and I don't see that changing anytime soon, probably within the next 12 months. So
12 months. Wow.
Well, realistically.
Yeah, people like to think about optimism, they like to think in 6 month periods, giving the poor people heart attacks.
Well, it's just when they presented the phases for the different restrictions to be lifted, that was one of the last restrictions to be lifted. And it's like, it's one of the easiest things for the government to do because it affects, no, it doesn't really affect people that much. It's like, our workday doesn't really affect much to be working from home, so I imagine they'll keep it on as one of the longest restrictions. But I'm no government or anything expert. But that is just the assumption that we think a lot of people are working with, that you'll be working from home for a long time, or maybe have home office as a permanent bonus for like several days a week if you enjoy it. And that because of that, people are more looking to move to new areas that weren't as popular in Dublin before.
So, in our quite unprofessional opinion, yeah, we don't really foresee rents in Dublin really falling lower. I think the most we can hope for is that they stabilise or don't rise as much. But yeah, I wouldn't really hold on to that, because people are still coming, People want a life to return to normal, somewhat normality. So I do think this trend will continue. I think every country is going to try not to do another lockdown. So yeah, in the end, we'll see.
Let us know in the comments, what are your thoughts, or what do you think would change the renting situation in Dublin or Ireland in general?
Yep, and we shall see you in the next video. Be sure to subscribe, as I said, check out the playlist. If you're new to Ireland or come here, we've got a whole set of videos that we may have answered some questions already. So, we'll have our playlist link there. You can go check it out, see if there's anything that would pique your interest and answer some questions for you. Until then, we see you later. Bis später.